Excuse me. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Yueki, for that introduction. It's weird to hear somebody else reading something about you. Thanks for your time. I know we're close to the holidays here in Puerto Rico, so it's difficult to get anything done. We're very happy to be here. Hopefully we can have a nice afternoon of interaction and talking about virtual desktops. Also, thank you to the people that are participating over the webcast. Like Yuvelki said, I think because of the size of group that we have, the best thing would be to have an interactive session. So Andres Santiago from Knowlity, the business development manager, is here with me, and he can go around and give you the microphone so you can get your question in, or you can let me know and I'll just talk you through the microphone for the benefit of the people in the webcast. So any questions that you have, just feel free to make them. What we're going to be talking today and this afternoon, it's about virtual desktops. VDI is an acronym that is being used heavily for the past year and a half. It's been giving a lot of connotations. It's sort of a buzzword right now. And what we want to do this afternoon is take the buzzword out of it and just look at the technology, see how it can help you, and ensure that you are going in the right path. So again, we're going to concentrate on that, VDI for education, and let you guys know how to take your infrastructure from a desktop that's living under a desk or on top of a desk into a virtual desktop, which is a desktop that lives in your data center, which is flexible and you can provide anywhere. So I'm going to start with a little analogy here. This is from the movie The Matrix. This is where the architect meets Neo, and the architect is talking about, giving Neo the information about, you've been here before, right? This is the 6th revision of this same conversation. And I think a lot about VDI as the issue with the Matrix. Virtualization is something that is not new. It's been around for a long time. Actually, mainframes, that's where it started. Everything was central. You were connected through a terminal emulator, which meant that all your work or horsepower was in the data center. So we've been in this position before, evaluating the same concept. It's just a little more developed and complex because of the technology that's being used today. So it's very important that we touch upon this, because one of the things that we see is that the problem today is not where I go virtual or not, is how do I go virtual. So to stress that point, in this section of the movie, Neo tells the architect, the problem is choice. And that is actually the problem that we have today. There's so many ways to virtualize. There's so many ways to provide a user with an application or a desktop. The idea is how to mesh all the options and the choices that I have together to make sure that I provide the best service out there to my end user. So we're going to touch upon choices. So VDI is just a concept. It's not a product. It's not a brand. It's not a manufacturer. It's just a concept. And the way that we can reach that concept is by different avenues. And we're going to touch upon some of them. And at the end of it all, they can all be called VDIs, right? So we're going to talk a lot about the anatomy of the challenge. What's the challenge that we have on hand, users versus apps? We're going to redefine the desktop a little bit to make sure that we can understand how to virtualize it. We're going to talk about different ways of doing virtualization. And then we're going to go into sort of the model that we can transform the desktop. So what would be a practical approach for you to start your own VDI project in your college or university? So this war has been going on for many years, right? User versus apps, okay? So for people that are in IT, the app is the most important part and the users are not that important. For the users that are using the apps that you are providing, the user is important and not necessarily the app. The problem has been that recently the powers to be that influence users and applications are going in exact opposite ways. So the reality of the fact is that there's only two things important in IT, users and apps. Everything else is just amber, green, or red lights blinking in a data center that is consuming a lot of utilities. Because at the end of it all, those servers are there for a reason, and it's to get an application to an end user. An application without users is nothing. A user without an application is nothing at all. The problem is, like I mentioned before, is that the forces that influence these two very important worlds are drifting them apart. Why? Because in the user world, users want to be global. They want to be more flexible. They're in branch offices. They're more and more and more. They're farther and farther away from you. They want mobility, and they want 24/7 access. So students, they might just wake up and say, I'm going to do this assignment at 3 o'clock in the morning, so the system should be up and running. You know, the people in operations, they want to process something, they'll be here during work hours. So it's a 24-hour operation. And now the diversity of desktops and devices has grown exponentially. Not only do you have students and faculty wanting to use Macs, but they're coming in with tablets. And every tablet is different. The Samsung, Google one, the Galaxy something, the Playbook, the iPad. They want to be able to access their information through their phones. So now one user, in theory, has 4 desktops. Their phone, their PC, their laptop, and their tablet. And you have to consider each of those devices as a separate one. Because what you need to do to provide access to that user is completely different for each one. So you got to figure out that user is coming from where, from what, and then figure out how to give something to them. In the application world, there's a whole bunch of consolidation going on. So I want to consolidate in a single server manufacturer. I want to have the same networking provider. I want to have the stack of the applications to run my campus that is from the same brand. So I have one person to go to when something's going on. So that consolidation is not necessarily in compliance with users being very heterogeneous and wanting to be flexible. There's also a concern of security. So now everything's in the data center. We're sharing information as we never did before. What are the security implications of that? The continuity and the web services. So those two forces are drifting users and applications apart. And that gap needs to be covered somehow. And that's where things like virtualization, virtual desktops come in. Another thing that's happening is, the introduction of Windows 7. It's the first operating system from Microsoft that is worth looking at after Windows XP. So there's a lot of projects around either, it's the time to go to the next version of Windows, and what is the implication on budgets, on effort of being able to do that. New applications that require the newer versions of operating systems. So most of you or some of you might be in a good time frame to figure out either I do a Windows deployment or some sort of deployment of an operating system, or I virtualize and future-proof my investment and then deploy in a virtual form so I don't have to deal with that deployment ever again. Desktop virtualization, as we're going to be defining it, does have some benefits. Maybe a year and a half ago, it was cost prohibitive because of the cost of hardware of being able to deploy a full desktop. But today, as hard disks get faster, smaller, cheaper, and more denser, and processing power is more and more available. I was just talking to somebody from Huertas College. He just bought a server. It's like 2 CPU, 6 core, 32 gigs, like if it was buying a calculator at Walgreens. So there's a lot more processing power out there that you can leverage at a more cheaper price. But virtual desktops, you should consider virtual desktops because it does have a better financial that it used to have 2 years ago. It does give you an ability to have business continuity. It's a lot easier to have a disaster recovery plan if everything's in your data center. You only have to worry about one place and not distributed places. It enables your different user groups to do anything, anywhere. And that's a huge benefit. I'll give you some examples later. And it does improve security and compliance, because when you have those points of access that are in your data center, actually data is never leaving your data center. Just a visual representation of that data is just basically deployed and accessed by the user, but the actual data never leaves your data center. So before we can get into how can we define a virtual desktop, we need to sort of redefine it. What are the main components, and what are the things that we need to do to be able to bring this desktop to a data center and make it virtual? This is your data. This is your desktop today, basically. It starts with a user, then an operating system, then applications, then data set. I'm sorry, this client would be the hardware. Hardware, operating system, applications, data, and user. And all the things are tightly coupled together. They cannot be broken down, right? I mean, you can't separate the hardware from the operating system, or the operating system from the applications, or the data settings, or the users. In the upper layers, it's a little bit more doable, but it's still very complex and cost prohibitive. And it doesn't provide a good user experience to users. And this is typically your traditional life cycle of a PC. You procure it, right? You fight a lot with budgets. You figure out a way to get them, and that's where your problem starts. Because now you have 400 PCs, that somehow you have to image them or put some sort of operating system on them. Then you have to secure them so people don't steal them, or that they don't corrupt data, or antiviruses and all this security stuff. Then you need to deploy them, actually get somebody in a cart and move and put them somewhere. Maybe the drop is not there, so you have to put something there. So it's very unflexible. After you deploy it, then you start monitoring it. People call, I lost my password, somebody changed the keys on the keyboard. That happens a lot. Breaks, so you need to go and fix them. That's in the maintain section. You have to back them up somehow. And at the end, you need to retire them, right? And then you start all over again, right? Because you're tied to a physical thing. And maybe in the States, PC life cycles might be 3 to 5 years. Puerto Rico, we know that it's more like 7 to 10. Or life cycle of the PC in Puerto Rico is until it breaks, right? Or until there are no more spare parts in eBay, something. But, that time that you spend maintaining that 7-year-old PC is money that's being wasted. So the first thing you need to do to figure out a way to have a virtual desktop is to uncouple all those important parts. So you have the client, which could be anything. It doesn't have to be a desktop. It could be a laptop. It could be a phone. It could be a tablet. It could be a TV. It doesn't really matter. And you have the user. So those two things, somehow they're going to be physical. We just don't want to define these as just desktop. They can be anything. And you take all the stuff in between and you bring to the data center. You bring the desktop operating system to the data center. You bring your applications to the data center. And you bring all your user profiles to the data center. As soon as you can do this, then you're in the right path, because you can actually then organize them on the fly and deploy them to any client and any user. It doesn't matter where that client's coming from what device it's coming from. If he has access and is authorized, you are going to be able to mix your operating system, your applications, and your user profile and deploy it out somehow. Okay? So this is the first step of a VDI. You need to make sure that all the stuff in between you can bring to your data center and have an infrastructure where you can reorganize them as you want to be able to deploy them out. So how do you deploy these desktops? You can do them locally, so that means that they're going to run in the actual endpoint device. You can do that, or they can run in the data centers, and the user can just see that desktop from whatever device. So good idea is to go virtual for all users. You have your mobile users, remote, office-based, contractor-based, task-based users. They all do fall into the I can virtualize category. Now, how I virtualize for each type of user is where the choices come in. When we say any device, it's actually any device. Virtualization has the flexibility that you can deploy on any device: smartphones, tablets, netbooks, thin client, diskless PCs, laptops, home and PC offices. It's going to be your same desktop. It's just going to go with you wherever you are connecting from. So that's very beneficial. And the question of choice, I like to call it FlexCast. So every time I go into a conversation with a customer to talk about choice, they want one choice. So because it's so difficult to do everything with one type of virtualization, then we categorize it at FlexCast. Doesn't really matter. If you use FlexCast, which is the ability to do any of them, then you sort of don't have to have that conversation of, no, but I want one. It's really one. It's just the way that you are delivering that desktop. So with FlexCast, you'll be able to do your task worker, which are factory workers, tank tellers, external contractors, branch offices, teleworkers, temporary users, which is maybe one that is a user pain for you guys in this industry, the education industry, which are university labs, training centers, students. Those students come in, come out. They are, months at a time they'll connect or not connect. How do you manage that? So this is where some of your pain is at today. And with virtual desktop, you can address some of that. Your knowledge workers, so that's your faculty and all your people from operations. And those people that are road warriors, so the people that are out there on the road constantly. Some students can also fall into that category. So FlexCast is actually just a dub name to be able to describe everything that we can do with one thing. And this is where we start defining VDIs, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types of VDIs, really. Same concept, same virtualization, same technology, just a matter of how you deploy it and what you need in your data center. So you have hosted share, hosted VDIs, stream VDIs, local VMs, and apps. And we'll go through some of them right now. The first one is actually an artist formerly known as Terminal Services. Most of you have heard about Terminal Services. Now it's called Remote Desktop Services. So a quick history on Terminal Services. Terminal Services was built by Citrix in 1985. It was sold to Microsoft, and it became Windows NT 4.0 for Terminal Services Edition. So Citrix sold the technology. They kept the networking protocol and the administration interface, and they just gave the core technology to Microsoft, which still lives as Remote Desktop Services. So Terminal Services is actually a type of VDI. It is a hosted shared VDI. And what that means is that you can in Terminal Services or Remote Desktop Services, you can publish a desktop. It'll look like a desktop. You can use it as a desktop, but the only thing is that desktop shares resources with other virtual desktops. So if you imagine a Windows server, you start drawing lines horizontally, right? As many virtual desktops as you can put. The problem with Terminal Services type of VDIs is that if user 10 crashes the server, all those users in that box will go down, right? So you'll lose all those users simultaneously. So you're sharing the resources of that server, but you're actually providing a virtual desktop. the user, and this is where technology people versus users sometimes they cannot look eye to eye. Because if you ask a user, what's that? They'll tell you it's a virtual desktop. It looks like a desktop, it feels like a desktop, I can use it as a desktop. But we in technology, we know it's not a virtual desktop. It's terminal services. That's what we've been programmed to do. But it's important to have that user feedback. So terminal services is just a VDI that is shared. And if I mess mine up, then the other users connected to that server will also hurt. If I'm running a process-intensive application in terminal services and it consumes 100% of the CPU, that CPU is shared by everybody that's connected in that server. Okay? So that's why we call it a shared host, a hosted shared desktop. And basically the idea is you have a user, a client, it connects to a broker, the broker tells you, let me validate you, you validate, you're authorized, and then it tells you what server you're connected to, and boom, there's your desktop, right? So there's a lot of arrows just to say that something that's very simple. Okay. There's another type of virtual desktop, is SoftGrid. SoftGrid is a company, it was called Expercity out of California. It was bought by Microsoft maybe like 10 years ago. And today it's called AppV as a Microsoft product. AppV is probably the most interesting and not used technology that you have in your campus agreements. If you are not using AppV, then you're not really using your campus agreement. Okay, it's super important, super cool technology, very easy to use. It's fantastic what it does. It's basically a way to have every application deployed centrally without touching a PC ever. And it runs in a sandbox. It doesn't break anything. It just flat out works. People don't know about SoftGrid or AppV because in Microsoft jargon, it's only part of something called MDOP, which is the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. So that's why people don't know about it. But check your licensing agreements. If you have something called MDOP, then you have AppV, so go ahead and implement it. AppV is a way to virtualize the applications. So you'll be able to basically take an application, install it, package it in a way that it doesn't hurt the operating system that it's running on, and then users can just run that application from a file server. So I can have in the same desktop, I could have running Office 2000, Office 2003, Office 2007, and Office 2010 without any issues. So that's great for people that use Access. There's a whole bunch of Access databases out there that are like 2003. So you have to have one PC for one thing or one PC for another thing. So check it out. It's very interesting technology, how it works. It's called application streaming. So if you run all these applications in a desktop and you go to control panel, there's nothing control panel because the operating system doesn't even know that application exists or is running in it because it uses a concept actually coming from Java, the sandbox, which is basically an encapsulated virtual world where this application has every single resource that it needs to run without letting the host know that it's there. So it's a fantastic technology for application deployment. And it has a very important role in virtual desktops because you can start combining all this stuff. So in a terminal services server, you can access an AppV application. But that same AppV application, you can access it from your desktop. I didn't install it twice. It's running from the same place. It's just virtualized. There's also a couple of new things going around. You know, Microsoft has done a great relationship with Citrix for actual VDIs. So virtual desktops, we were talking before about terminal services. One server, everybody shares a desktop. So when you go to virtual desktops, or it's a desktop that is hosted, right? So that desktop is unique. If that desktop goes down, the rest of the desktop hosted by a server keep on going. Okay. So basically, a hosted virtual desktop, it's one where you have a MacBook Air on one side, you have a Windows operating system on the other. You go to a single place, you log on, you're presented with an icon which launches your virtual desktop that's running somewhere in a data center, and then your desktop comes up. Doesn't matter what operating system it is, doesn't matter what form factor it is, doesn't matter what type of connection you have. You can be connected, wireless 3G modem, or you can be connected in the LAN. The actual bandwidth required to be able to run Windows 7 in a virtual format is 25 kbps. So you can run it from a modem. Right? If you go watch a movie, it's not going to be that great. But if you're working on an Excel spreadsheet, or if you're entering POs or creating orders, it will work just fine. So the idea is to have a hosted virtual desktop that you can access from anywhere. You can run the latest technologies like Remote FX from Microsoft. It's optimized for low bandwidth consumption. It's optimized for a one environment. Now, pray for our audience from the States, they're not running into this issue because bandwidth is cheap and good. But in places like Puerto Rico, bandwidth it's still an issue. The infrastructure here is very old. The copper doesn't work. People don't know where stuff is connected to. So there's high latency links. Bandwidth is still very expensive. Wireless connections are okay, but they do suffer from the inclemencies of the weather. So having technology that's optimized for bad environments is actually good. Media streaming can be done into this desktops that are hosted, self-service applications, on-demand apps by remote desktop services, RRB, granular access. So hosted virtual desktop based on technology from certain manufacturers have a lot to offer. Rich multimedia, real-time collaboration, USBs. So one of the things, there's 2 or 3 things that are critical about a virtual desktop, right? It's printing. People still print. I want to connect a peripheral to my desktop or my device and make sure that my virtual device has it. So when I connect a jump drive to my thin client or my PC, that virtual desktop recognizes it and I can use it as such. So peripherals are important, things like printers, video cameras for online collaboration. All these are important to be defined when you go on, or you're venturing into a virtualization of a desktop. Because if you don't look at that, you're going to be alienating a lot of users that might be the most important ones to adopt the technology. So comparing some technologies out there, bandwidth utilization is very important. When you're moving everything to the data center, you have to look at bandwidth and make sure that you have enough. So you want to go out there to a technology that consumes less bandwidth possible. So with again, talking about desktops, either they're hosted, they're virtual, or they're like shared, users will continue to demand access to all this stuff from anywhere. And it's just getting worse. I went to Best Buy today to buy something because I thought I was going to have to connect my Mac to the projector. It's a MacBook Air, so it doesn't have anything. There were as many tablets as laptops in the demonstration area. I mean, it's like Asus has a tablet. I didn't even know who Asus was. Everybody has a tablet out there. There's tablets of every color, price, idea. Sony has one. I had not seen it before. And it's going to get worse. Worse and worse and worse. And now you're going to have to find ways to connect all these different types of tablets because they're not all created equal. The applications, they want to run them. So if you have iOS or Android or whatever, or the one from Amazon, how are you going to handle all of that? If you virtualize them and you only present them to an endpoint, then they're running natively. It's just like watching a TV. You're just looking at the image that is happening on the server. So it doesn't really matter what device you're connecting from. And that's a way to future-proof, your infrastructure. Cisco has a new phone that has a tablet. So the phone actually pick it out, you go, and that's a tablet, and you connect it back, and it's the touch part of the phone. So it's getting to a point that it's sort of ridiculous, but there's a consumerization of IT that we cannot fight. Users will come in and may the best tablet win, and you're going to have to support that. It's not like, no, I'm not going to support iPads. It's not your call. It's the market's call. It's whoever wins. So the consumerization of IT is one that is flexible. You cannot control it because it's going to beat you down. Believe me, we've tried unsuccessfully to make customers just stick to one standard. You eventually fail. Now, I was talking to somebody, I don't remember which one of you were. There's a new tendency, way more interesting. It's called local VMs. So it's a virtual desktop that can run offline, that you can check out and take with you. And that product will come out first or second quarter of next year from Citrix and Microsoft. And when that happens, then I assure you that the game will change, because that will change forever your backup, your backup strategy. It will change the way you're going to buy your devices, because you will not have to support a device anymore. And devices will actually become like in a RAID array, they call RAID because they're like redundant, inexpensive, something disks. When you mess up a device, you just throw it and get another one. Because you as an administrator, you don't need to touch it. They just go in and they log on and they get their desktop. But that desktop runs locally on that device. So how is it? This is something that is not entirely new. Parallels is actually the one that created this market. Parallels is typically used in Mac environment to run Windows. So it's a hypervisor, but it's a type 2 hypervisor. Type 2 means that it has a host. So there's an operating system that runs, and there the hypervisor runs, and then it can have child OSs. Now, what these people have come up with is a way for having a type 1 hypervisor. So a type 1 hypervisor is one that is the operating system of the device is the hypervisor. Like VMware in their server products, like ESX, like Citrix Sign Client, like Windows 2008 Server Core. So the hypervisor is actually the operating system. But we've been talking about server technologies. These people are bringing that concept to a device, to an endpoint. So when that hypervisor boots up, it basically connects to somewhere that you configured and says, what desktops should I have? And it just downloads them. And that's it. So it's actually, there's a similarity to Outlook. Right? Outlook is an email application, so it should be always connected. So you connect to Outlook, you don't really tell it to synchronize anymore. You don't have to hit F9 as you used to get send and receive. You just open Outlook and there you go, email downloads. And you start working and you send emails and it works fine. You disconnect, you open your Outlook. You won't have the latest and greatest emails, but you can answer email, create tasks, do anything you want. When you connect, it's synchronized. So imagine that with your desktop, with your operating system, right? Once it's synchronized, I'll start working on it, and everything's going to be synchronized with my data center. I can disconnect, leave, work on my files, work on my email, work on my Excel spreadsheets, and when I connect, it just synchronizes. So why would I need to do backups anymore? I mean, do you back up Outlook? No, you back up Exchange, right? So do you back up desktop? Why? I don't care. It lives in the data center, right? It also gives you the ability to have multiple desktops. So I have my AutoCAD desktop, provisional ready, perfectly working. I have my desktop for my accounting application or my accounting class. I have my desktop for my medical billing class. They're all there, right? In labs, in many of the universities that you work at, you have to have all these 50 different applications installed in every single PC. And they have conflicts, and the DLLs don't work, and the different versions, and you do an upgrade, and it breaks something, and you don't get to know what breaks until the class starts. And then you have Peachtree and the QuickBooks, and all these applications have to be meshed in one single place. Not anymore. You can actually give them, if it's going to be an accounting class that uses Peachtree, you can have a clean desktop with only Peachtree installed. You're going to give an AutoCAD or graphic animation class, you can have only that, right? And when they connect to the network, it will just be downloaded. You can actually coordinate it so it can be only accessible during class periods, or when the semester ends, it will just magically vanish because it's a subscription-based service. And you can give the students the ability to have that offline. So first day of class, they connected, they downloaded their PC that has Peachtree, and that day they disconnect and they get taken to their house and it will work fine. And when the class ends, it will just be destroyed. Right? It also gives you the ability to also have your own personal desktop, so you can be running your Mac OS or your web or your Chrome OS or your Windows, if that's what you're into. If you're whatever personal thing you may want, it can coexist, right? And it's completely separated by that hypervisor. User personalization is persisted. So you can have all the policies that you want for those virtual desktops that live in that desktop, in that client, and not conflict with the user's personal belongings. It's great for contractors. It's great for programs that are used. You bring your own computer to work. There's a couple of companies, Citrix included. For example, Citrix, maybe 2 years ago, they implemented a program where when you're a Citrix employee, they'll give you, I think, $2,000 every 3 years. So you buy whatever you want. And if you break it, then you need to rebuy it. But the capital expenditures that were lower significantly on Citrix, because those investments, I mean, it's basically, I'm giving you an assistance for you to buy your laptop. You can buy whatever you want. You can buy a $3,000 laptop. You just need to cover the $1,000 difference. But I don't manage it. It's not Citrix's responsibility at all. And it's tremendous because users buy what they want. I mean, first day of work, you go in and you open that desktop, it's like, I had a Lenovo last job that I had, and it sucked, and now I have the same thing here, or the HP one or the Dell one. It doesn't really matter. I mean, people want to buy what they want. They don't want to be given something that is just for work. and students the same way. There's tons of universities out there in the States. There's actually one in Jamaica that's doing this. When you go into the university and you register, you get a laptop with the hypervisor. And you can put whatever operating system you want on it as a child operating system. When you log in, you'll have your Sacred Heart desktop, and you have your own desktop. And everything's managed through the network. So this is the part that I was talking to you about. It connects through an HTTPS connection, secure connection, and it just synchronizes your configured local virtual machines into your infrastructure. So automatically backs up everything. It also does versioning on the back end. So if you rolled out some sort of change and you figure out it wasn't a good idea, you can just roll back to the last one. So it synchronizes, but it also can version from days to one day to the next. So if for whatever reason you lost your device, you go get another one, you connect, and then it synchronizes back. Yeah.
If I have some stuff that are mine, that is not part of the
Well,
virtualization, I lost mine, right? The one that I have in my, for example, in my iPod.
The IT department doesn't care about
No,
yours.
I know, but just to understand. I
Yes,
know,
yes.
but just to
So
understand.
only the virtual machine that the IT department manages is saved. If you didn't back yours up, then maybe if you're a very important person, the university will also back up your personal one. Yes. There's always people that can get away with it. Exactly.
Hi, I'm curious about the overhead, the local overhead for running the virtual machines versus, running Windows.
Yeah.
For example, if you're running a Windows VM.
There's always going to be some overhead. If you have a virtual desktop, Microsoft has a technology called MDev, Microsoft Desktop Enter something. They always have these weird acronyms. So it's the same concept. You have a desktop and you can run virtual desktops in that, like virtual PC type of thing. Those type of technology will have a lot more overhead than this one because the hypervisor is native to the operating system. So you will always find some level of overhead, but in today's market with the type of horsepower that you're getting today in your laptops, it probably is negligible. Now, you bring up a very important part. This hypervisor is tied directly to the processor. So the only processor today that can handle this technology is Intel's vPro. So any Intel chip that has the virtualization code in it can do this. AMD is working on it, but hasn't been able to complete that virtualization code in their chip. So it's very tied into the hardware in the sense that the send client, which is the product's name, actually reads directly to the processor. So the overhead is little. Everybody is expecting AMD to pick it up and make sure that they have that virtualization technology in it, but AMD hasn't been able to achieve it just yet. Today, Lenovo's, Dell's, HP's come with send client embedded already. So there's like a hardware abstraction layer page in Citrix that you have all the models that are supported. And they're growing every day. Unfortunately, AMD needs to finish their part. And that's the magic of it. That's why it's so fast, because it's tied to the processor directly. So some of the killer features of a virtual machine, it can be either a shared virtual machine It can be a hosted virtual machine, or it can be a local virtual machine. So the three that we have talked about. And they can all be served with AppV for applications and stuff like that. So some of the killer features are, the user experience, the ability to connect multiple peripherals, including cameras. So collaboration of the future will be, every laptop has their own camera, and you can have your video chats or video conferences. So it's very important to be able to achieve that level of integration. And this type of technology in the VM, on the VM side, does support a lot of it. Good enough to be able to really use it for work or play. Ability to connect multiple desktops. There's a little bit of a race between the different manufacturers that do VMs, like the Microsoft, the Zen, Citrix, VMware. There's also others like VirtualBox from Oracle, and smaller companies out there, NetXtop. It's weird because one of the competitions is how many monitors do you support. So they've reached like 18 monitors. Really? You need 18 monitors, and this is going to be the conversation of why I choose one versus the other? Come on, man. But they continue. Like before, whoever was able to support 2 dual monitors was king. Now they're up like to 16. I'm not sure what the use case would be, but they can say that they support 16. Just like how many white elephants Thailand emperor had. So how many monitors can you support? But they're up to the 16. Very important is printing. I cannot stress the fact that people believe that we're saving the world on paper and we're using less paper. That's completely untrue. So people print more than ever. Everything's printed because people don't believe in digital copies and all this other stuff. And printing is probably the #1 issue of every single implementation that we've done. Why? Because the IT department never thought printing was important until they rolled out all their virtual machines. And suddenly people are calling, I cannot print. I have to print to a printer that is like 2 cubicles away, and I have one right in my back. I want to print to this one. Right? It's true. True, completely true. So, people, if we're going to go into a virtual machine project, please think about your printers. Think about it. There's still a lot of dot matrix printers around in Puerto Rico. That thing doesn't work in a virtual environment. Doesn't matter which one it is. Dot matrix is built on a different printing language. So it really doesn't work. Especially those, there's a printer mark, those continuous paper printers, terrible to support. We got to do all these ninja tricks to be able to achieve that. Printing is very important, and users do care about printing. And new technologies, and Citrix is probably the leader here, they can support all this type of devices like dictation devices, check readers, signature pads, all this stuff. I'm sorry? Barcode readers. You can support all of that through a virtual machine using the right technology, right? Not all technologies support that. Rich graphics, also very important. Applications are getting more and more multimedia-like, richer in the way you use them. There's a lot of multimedia content. So there's a lot of applications out there that their help files are going away with tutorials that are on YouTube, stuff like that. So the wave of multimedia inside business applications is very important to follow. And there's also a lot of applications like AutoCAD applications, simulation applications, standard design applications that are extremely sensitive to not being able to display things like they should. So it's very important that, again, it's a question of choice. So if I have the right technology partner, let's say I chose Microsoft and Citrix, and I feel comfortable that I can deploy any virtual machine, and I get a request for AutoCAD, I know that to be able to deploy AutoCAD virtually, I cannot use a shared virtual machine. I have to use a hosted virtual machine. But the fact that I chose the right technology partners allows me to be able to do that seamlessly without having to invest another dime. So very important to analyze what the user case is, where that user is coming from, for what it will use it. For those of you that have inside your facilities programming classes, so like you use Visual Studio or you use Adobe, so those users, you need to give them more power, more resources. So either a hosted virtual machine is a good idea, or a local virtual machine is a good idea. It doesn't really matter, because that hosted virtual machine can be the same one that I give out to a local user that has send client. So same image, just different places that I can put it. One optimization, branch offices, satellite campuses are coming from everywhere. Long distance education is also very